is ready to face the paradox of kindness is one of the most unsettling realities of human relationships, because it shakes the very assumptions people carry about morality, empathy, and goodness. We are taught from childhood that being kind leads to acceptance, love, and trust. Yet, time and again, life shows us that kindness is not always rewarded. Sometimes it attracts hostility, suspicion, or even hatred. This contradiction is not random. It arises from the complex interplay of the conscious and unconscious dimensions of human nature. When someone extends kindness, they are not just giving something tangible, they are also presenting a moral stance, a reflection of values, and often an unspoken claim about who they are. For those who receive it, the experience can be comforting or deeply unsettling depending on what it awakens in them. Imagine a person who carries within themselves a sense of inadequacy or a long history of unmet emotional needs. When kindness appears at their door, it may not be seen as a gift, but as a reminder of how deprived they feel. Instead of accepting the warmth, they may recoil, for the gesture brings their wounds into sharper focus. It is not the act itself that hurts them, but what the act symbolizes. To be offered kindness is to confront the reality that one needs it, and that confrontation can stir anger, jealousy, or resentment. This is the paradox. The very thing meant to heal can become a trigger of hostility. Another dimension of this paradox is the perception of power that accompanies kindness. When you give, you place yourself in a position of strength, however unintentionally. You are the one who has something to offer, while the other is positioned as the receiver. In an ideal world, this exchange would be embraced with gratitude, but in reality, it can feel humiliating to someone who struggles with pride, insecurity, or unresolved feelings of inferiority. They may hate you not because of what you gave, but because of the imbalance that your gift represents. Your kindness exposes their dependency, their lack, their vulnerability, and rather than face those feelings, they lash out. The paradox deepens when we consider that kindness is often misinterpreted. In some minds, it raises suspicion. What does this person want in return? What hidden motive lurks behind the smile or the generous act? When people carry distrust in their psyche, they project it outward, assuming that others must operate by the same hidden agendas they conceal within themselves. Thus, what was offered in sincerity is filtered through suspicion, and what was meant as a bridge becomes perceived as a trap. The giver, bewildered, wonders why hostility has arisen. Yet the hostility belongs not to the act of kindness, but to the internal conflicts of the one receiving it. This is why the paradox of kindness is so enduring and painful. It challenges our idealized view of the moral order. We want to believe that goodness naturally generates goodness, that light calls forth light, that love evokes love. But in the deep layers of the psyche, things are not so linear. Light often calls forth shadow, because when brightness enters, it reveals what was hidden in the dark. Kindness becomes a light that makes visible what someone has long tried to conceal: their envy, their bitterness, their sense of being unworthy. And so hatred emerges, not as a response to cruelty or malice, but paradoxically as a defense mechanism against the very presence of kindness. When this paradox is understood, it no longer feels like a betrayal of human values, but like a profound truth about human nature. It shows us that kindness is never a simple transaction, but a psychological encounter that stirs the deepest currents of the soul. Every human being carries within them a hidden side, a part of the psyche that rarely appears in the daylight of consciousness. This side is not necessarily evil in the traditional sense, but it contains everything a person rejects, denies, or represses about themselves. It is the unacknowledged fears, the insecurities, the impulses deemed unacceptable, and the weaknesses buried beneath the surface of the carefully constructed persona. This hidden counterpart exists in everyone, no matter how virtuous, accomplished, or noble they may seem on the outside. It exerts a powerful influence over human behavior, often in ways people do not realize. When we ask why kindness sometimes arouses hostility, the answer can often be traced to this unseen figure within. The hidden self is like a shadow that follows us wherever we go, even when we are unaware of its presence. It lives in the unconscious, silently shaping how we perceive others and how we respond to their actions. When someone shows us kindness, this shadow can be stirred from its slumber. For the person who feels inadequate, kindness does not appear as a gift, but as a reminder of inadequacy. For the one who struggles with envy, kindness becomes a spotlight that illuminates what they lack. For the person who has repressed their own capacity for compassion, kindness may even feel like a threat, because it reminds them of the qualities they have buried. In this way, what should be experienced as a blessing can awaken the darker, unresolved aspects of the psyche. What makes the hidden self so powerful is that it operates outside the boundaries of conscious control. A person may genuinely believe they are kind, tolerant, or confident, yet their hidden side carries resentments, rivalries, and fears they refuse to admit. When confronted with another's goodness, the shadow leaps forward, reacting with anger, hostility, or rejection. This reaction is not born of reason, but of unconscious defense. It is as if the kindness of the other has exposed the fragile areas of the self that one has worked so hard to keep concealed. The hatred directed toward the giver of kindness is, in truth, the hatred a person has long directed toward their own hidden wounds. The hidden self also thrives on projection, which means it casts its unwanted qualities onto others. If someone has repressed aggression, they may see aggression everywhere around them. If they have denied their neediness, they may accuse others of being manipulative whenever kindness is offered. The shadow disguises itself by pointing outward, and so when kindness appears, it may be twisted into something it is not. The giver is accused of arrogance, control, or ulterior motives, not because these things are truly present, but because the hidden self of the receiver has painted them onto the act. This is why some people hate you even when you are kind. They are not responding to you as you truly are, but to the reflection of their own unacknowledged self that your kindness has forced them to encounter. Understanding the role of the hidden self makes it clear that hatred born from kindness is rarely about the giver at all. It is about the unresolved tensions within the person receiving it. The hostility is the voice of their shadow, an eruption of what has long been repressed. This is why such reactions often appear disproportionate or irrational. The surface situation, an act of kindness, does not explain the depth of emotion that follows. Only when we recognize that each person carries within them a hidden counterpart can we see that hostility is often the echo of an inner struggle projected outward in the presence of kindness. Acts of kindness are never neutral. They are mirrors that reflect back the inner landscape of those who receive them. When you extend generosity, compassion, or understanding, you are not simply offering something external. You are holding up a reflection of values, character, and wholeness. To those who are grounded and at peace with themselves, this reflection feels warm and affirming. It reminds them of the goodness that still lives within humanity, and they welcome it with gratitude. But for others whose inner worlds are shaped by insecurity, inadequacy, or envy, kindness becomes an uncomfortable mirror, exposing cracks they would rather not see. Instead of appreciating the gesture, they resent it, because it magnifies the difference between what they possess internally and what you seem to embody. When kindness becomes a mirror, it often confronts people with the gap between who they are and who they wish to be. Imagine someone who secretly feels incapable of kindness, weighed down by bitterness or past wounds. Your act of compassion does not simply reach them. It reveals to them what they have lost. It highlights a quality they once silenced or abandoned. In such cases, kindness is less of a gift and more of a reminder, and reminders can sting. They draw attention to hidden weaknesses or dormant desires that an individual has spent years pushing away. The reaction, therefore, may not be gratitude but irritation or hostility, as if the mirror you held up had shown them a face they did not want to recognize. Another way kindness functions as a mirror is through the sense of comparison. Kindness also reflects back the unresolved wounds people carry from their past. For some, a simple act of care might remind them of the love they never received, the tenderness that was withheld, or the affection that came with conditions. Your kindness, in this sense, is a mirror of loss. It does not merely exist in the present moment. It resonates with old wounds, stirring pain that has long been buried. Instead of embracing the gesture, the person may recoil, resenting you for making them feel once again what they could not bear to feel as children or in earlier experiences. The mirror of kindness reflects not only who they are today, but the deep scars of who they have been. The mirror of kindness can also reveal moral truths that some prefer to avoid. When you act selflessly, you shine a light on the selfishness of others. When you forgive, you highlight their grudges. When you act with patience, you reveal their restlessness. The mirror does not flatter. It shows a contrast that can be uncomfortable. In these moments, hatred arises as a form of resistance. Instead of facing the truth the mirror reveals, people turn their discomfort outward, blaming you for making them feel exposed. What you offered as kindness becomes reinterpreted as a challenge, a subtle judgment, or an unwanted lesson. This dynamic shows that kindness, while beautiful, has a dual nature. It can soothe or it can unsettle, depending on the state of the one who receives it. As a mirror, it reflects both light and shadow, amplifying what already exists within the observer. For those at peace with themselves, it deepens connection. For those burdened by unacknowledged fears, inadequacy, or wounds, it provokes resentment. In this sense, Kindness is never just a simple act. It is a revelation, a mirror in which people cannot help but see themselves more clearly, whether they wish to or not. To receive kindness requires a certain openness of spirit, a willingness to admit that one is in need and that another has the power to provide. This is not a simple matter, for to accept kindness is also to acknowledge vulnerability, and vulnerability often unsettles the ego. Many people are far more comfortable giving than receiving because giving places them in control. They remain the strong one, the generous one, the capable one. But to be on the receiving end is to be confronted with dependence, however small, and this can feel humiliating to those who guard their pride fiercely. Humility is the true prerequisite of receiving, and humility is a quality that the modern psyche often resists. When someone extends kindness, the receiver must momentarily step out of their defensive posture and let another enter their world. This act of letting down the guard is frightening for people who have been hurt, betrayed, or dismissed in the past. Their pride becomes a fortress built to protect them from further wounds. Yet, when kindness approaches, it asks them to lower the drawbridge even for a moment. For some, this is intolerable because it reactivates old feelings of exposure. To accept help is to risk being disappointed again, to risk being seen as weak, to risk losing the illusion of complete self-sufficiency. Hatred may then arise, not because of the kindness itself, but as a defense against the humility it demands. Another aspect of this difficulty lies in how kindness can disturb the balance of power. The one who receives is placed in the position of needing, while the giver embodies abundance. For those with fragile self-esteem, this imbalance is deeply threatening. It suggests that the receiver is somehow less than the giver, and to a wounded ego, this is unbearable. Instead of responding with gratitude, they may respond with resentment, projecting hostility onto the one who offered the kindness. They may convince themselves that the act was done to belittle them, to establish superiority, or to highlight their weakness. The hatred serves as a shield, protecting the self from the painful acknowledgement of dependence. Humility in receiving also requires trust, and trust is a quality that does not come easily to those who live with suspicion of others. When you accept kindness, you must believe, even briefly, that the giver has no hidden motives, no traps, no strings attached. But if a person carries within themselves a deep sense of distrust, shaped perhaps by experiences of manipulation or betrayal, then every act of kindness appears tinged with danger. In such a case, the ego would rather reject the kindness outright, even with hostility, than risk the vulnerability of trusting it. Hatred here functions as protective gesture, closing the door before intimacy or reliance can develop. Furthermore, to receive kindness means to face one's own limitations. A proud individual who sees themselves as self-sufficient may struggle greatly with this realization. The very act of being helped contradicts the narrative they hold about who they are. To maintain their illusion of invulnerability, they may react with anger toward the one who offered the kindness, as though the offer itself was an insult. What appears outwardly as hostility toward the giver is inwardly a rejection of the fragile truth. The act reveals that they too are human, dependent, and incomplete without others. The essence of this struggle lies in the conflict between ego and humility. Ego seeks to maintain control, pride, and superiority, while humility invites surrender, openness, and acknowledgement of need. To receive kindness gracefully is to allow humility to prevail, but when the ego resists, the result can be hostility. This explains why some people, instead of welcoming kindness, respond with rejection or hatred. They are not truly rejecting the kindness itself, they are rejecting the humility that it asks of them, a humility they are not yet ready to embrace. To receive kindness requires a certain openness of spirit, a willingness to admit that one is in need and that another has the power to provide. This is not a simple matter, for to accept kindness is also to acknowledge vulnerability, and vulnerability often unsettles the ego. Many people are far more comfortable giving than receiving because giving places them in control. They remain the strong one, the generous one, the capable one. But to be on the receiving end is to be confronted with dependence, however small. And this can feel humiliating to those who guard their pride fiercely. Humility is the true prerequisite of receiving, and humility is a quality that the modern psyche often resists. When someone extends kindness, the receiver must momentarily step out of their defensive posture and let another enter their world. This act of letting down the guard is frightening for people who have been hurt, betrayed, or dismissed in the past. Their pride becomes a fortress built to protect them from further wounds. Yet when kindness approaches, it asks them to lower the drawbridge, even for a moment. For some, this is intolerable because it reactivates old feelings of exposure. To accept help is to risk being disappointed again, to risk being seen as weak, to risk losing the illusion of complete self-sufficiency. Hatred may then arise not because of the kindness itself, but as a defense against the humility it demands. Another aspect of this difficulty lies in how kindness can disturb the balance of power. The one who receives is placed in the position of needing, while the giver embodies abundance. For those with fragile self-esteem, this imbalance is deeply threatening. It suggests that the receiver is somehow less than the giver, and to a wounded ego, this is unbearable. Instead of responding with gratitude, they may respond with resentment, projecting hostility onto the one who offered the kindness. They may convince themselves that the act was done to belittle them, to establish superiority, or to highlight their weakness. The hatred serves as a shield, protecting the self from the painful acknowledgement of dependence. Humility in receiving also requires trust, and trust is a quality that does not come easily to those who live with suspicion of others. When you accept kindness, you must believe, even briefly, that the giver has no hidden motives, no traps, no strings attached. But if a person carries within themselves a deep sense of distrust, shaped perhaps by experiences of manipulation or betrayal, then every act of kindness appears tinged with danger. In such a case, the ego would rather reject the kindness outright, even with hostility, than risk the vulnerability of trusting it. Hatred here functions as a protective gesture, closing the door before intimacy or reliance can develop. Furthermore, to receive kindness means to face one's own limitations. A proud individual who sees themselves as self-sufficient may struggle greatly with this realization. The very act of being helped contradicts the narrative they hold about who they are. To maintain their illusion of invulnerability, they may react with anger toward the one who offered the kindness, as though the offer itself was an insult. What appears outwardly as hostility toward the giver is inwardly a rejection of the fragile truth the act reveals, that they too are human, dependent, and incomplete without others. The essence of this struggle lies in the conflict between ego and humility. Ego seeks to maintain control, pride, and superiority, while humility invites surrender, openness, and acknowledgement of need. To receive kindness gracefully is to allow humility to prevail, but when the ego resists, the result can be hostility. This explains why some people, instead of welcoming kindness, respond with rejection or hatred. They are not truly rejecting the kindness itself. They are rejecting the humility that it asks of them, a humility they are not yet ready to embrace. Your light can unintentionally expose another person's darkness, and this is one of the deepest reasons why kindness is sometimes met with hostility. Every act of goodness carries with it a radiance, a quality that does not simply perform the deed, but also reveals something about the one who performs it. When you show patience, it shines a light on impatience in others. When you forgive, it highlights the bitterness. When you extend generosity, it quietly uncovers the stinginess. This exposure is rarely welcomed because it makes people face truths about themselves they would prefer to ignore. Hatred then becomes a shield against the discomfort of seeing their flaws mirrored in the light of your actions. In relationships, people often maintain a fragile balance by keeping certain aspects of themselves hidden from others and even from themselves. They cover their insecurities with masks of confidence, their selfishness with rationalizations, their envy with denial. But when someone enters their life embodying the very qualities they lack, the concealment begins to crack. Your kindness does not simply coexist with their inner state. It illuminates the gap between what they are and what they wish to be. That gap can feel unbearable, for it exposes their incompleteness, their failure to live up to their own unspoken ideals. Rather than facing this inner confrontation, they redirect the discomfort outward, resenting you for making them feel inferior. The exposure created by kindness is not deliberate. Rarely does anyone set out to shame another by being good, yet the psyche does not always perceive it that way. To the one whose inner world is ruled by insecurity, your kindness can seem like a spotlight deliberately aimed at their deficiencies. They interpret your compassion as pity, your generosity as superiority, your patience as a quiet rebuke of their restlessness. What you meant as an offering of goodwill is twisted in their perception into an act of judgment. In this way, kindness becomes threatening, not because of what it is, but because of what it reveals. Consider how difficult it is for some people to accept forgiveness. To be forgiven is to be reminded of guilt, and not everyone can face that reminder. Instead of feeling relieved, they may feel exposed, as though your act of grace has pulled their wrongdoing into sharper focus. Similarly, Generosity can remind someone of their own lack of giving, and patience can remind them of their short temper. Each quality of light calls forth its opposite shadow in the observer, and the confrontation between the two is rarely comfortable. Hatred becomes a way of rejecting the mirror, of pushing away the discomfort that arises when darkness is revealed by light. This phenomenon also explains why people sometimes attack those who strive to live morally or compassionately. The very existence of such a person can be a silent accusation, a reminder that higher possibilities exist, that they too could live differently, but have chosen not to. Instead of being inspired, they may feel diminished, and in their resentment they lash out at the one who reflects back what they lack. It is easier to hate the person who exposes the darkness than to confront the darkness itself. The truth is that light and darkness are not separate realms. They exist together in every human being. When your light reveals someone else's shadow, they are given an opportunity to recognize and integrate it, but that is a painful and often unwelcome process. If they are unprepared for such self-examination, they may choose rejection over reflection. Hatred is the quicker, easier path because it places the blame outside of themselves. What could have been a moment of growth becomes instead a moment of hostility directed toward the one who shined the light. In this way, your kindness, meant to heal or connect, becomes the very thing that awakens resistance. As your light forces others to confront the darkness they would rather leave hidden. People often see in others what they cannot bear to see in themselves. And this is the essence of projection. When someone responds with hatred to your kindness, it is often because they are not truly perceiving you as you are, but as a screen onto which their unconscious casts its unresolved conflicts. Projection is a natural psychological defense, a way for the mind to rid itself of qualities it refuses to acknowledge. Instead of saying, "I am envious," or "I am bitter," the person unconsciously declares, "You are arrogant," "You are manipulative," or "You are insincere." The unwanted qualities are denied internally but painted onto someone else externally. Thus, the hostility that arises in response to kindness may not be about the act itself, but about the projection of inner struggles onto the one who offered it. When you show compassion, you may unknowingly trigger someone's repressed vulnerability. They may accuse you of being condescending, not because you are, but because they cannot tolerate their own sense of weakness. When you give without asking for anything in return, they may assume you are calculating or trying to control them, because that is how they themselves approach giving. Your action becomes a canvas for their inner world, distorted by the shadows they refuse to face. The hatred you receive is in reality their own disowned qualities coming back to them. Only now they are disguised as accusations directed at you. This mechanism of projection explains why some reactions to kindness seem exaggerated or irrational. On the surface, there is no reason for hostility toward someone who acts generously, but beneath the surface, the unconscious has seized the moment to externalize its tensions. For the person who struggles with suppressed anger, your kindness may somehow feel like an attack, a reminder that their own inner world is unsettled. For the person who is secretly selfish, your selflessness may appear manipulative. The distorted perception allows them to avoid confronting their own flaws, for it is far easier to despise another than to face the truth about oneself. Projection can also occur with positive qualities. People may hate you not because you embody something negative, but because you embody something positive that they have rejected in themselves. Perhaps they once longed to be compassionate, forgiving, or generous, but gave up on those parts of their soul, burying them in the unconscious. When they see you living out those qualities, their buried desires awaken, and with them comes resentment. They project their own abandoned ideals onto you and hate you for reminding them of what they have lost. In this sense, projection is not only about disowned flaws, but also about disowned virtues. Your kindness becomes intolerable because it mirrors the unlived life within them. The tragedy of projection is that it blocks genuine connection. Instead of seeing the giver of kindness as they truly are, the receiver interacts with their own shadow, mistaking it for the other. The relationship becomes clouded by illusions, and hatred grows out of misunderstanding. The giver may feel unjustly accused, while the receiver feels justified in their hostility. Yet both are trapped in a drama scripted by the unconscious. Until projection is recognized for what it is, the hostility cannot be resolved because it does not belong to the present moment, but to the hidden battles inside the one projecting. To understand this dynamic is to see that the hostility directed toward kindness is rarely personal. It is the shadow seeking escape, the unconscious trying to rid itself of what it does not wish to claim. The one who hates is in truth wrestling with themselves, and the one who is hated has simply become the unfortunate screen onto which the struggle is cast. People often see in others what they cannot bear to see in themselves, and this is the essence of projection. When someone responds with hostility to kindness, they are not reacting to the true nature of the person before them, but to an image shaped by their own unconscious. Projection functions as a defense mechanism. It allows individuals to cast away the qualities they dislike or reject in themselves by attributing them to others. Instead of admitting, "I feel envious," or "I am insecure," they unconsciously insist that it is the other who is arrogant, manipulative, or insincere. The discomfort they feel is therefore not a product of your action, but of their own disowned qualities reflected back at them. When you act with generosity, you may unintentionally awaken another's hidden resentment. Rather than acknowledging their own inability to give, they label your kindness as controlling or self-serving. When you offer compassion, someone who has buried their vulnerability might experience it as pity, accusing you of condescension. Your behavior becomes a mirror they cannot tolerate, so they project their inner conflicts outward. In this way, the hatred directed at kindness is not a response to the deed itself, but to the uncomfortable truths it stirs within the unconscious of the receiver. This explains why some reactions to kindness appear exaggerated or irrational. To the observer, it makes little sense that a benevolent act should provoke hostility. But in the psyche of the one projecting, the gesture carries an entirely different meaning. If they struggle with selfishness, your selflessness threatens them by highlighting what they suppress. If they wrestle with guilt, your forgiveness confronts them with what they refuse to resolve. The intensity of their reaction is a measure of the depth of the projection, not the reality of your intention. Projection does not only apply to flaws, it also applies to virtues. People may reject you not because of something negative you represent, but because you embody qualities they abandoned within themselves. A person who once dreamed of being compassionate but hardened their heart might resent your gentleness. Another who gave up on generosity may feel provoked by your open-handedness. These unlived potentials, buried in the unconscious, rise to the surface when they see them expressed in you, and the confrontation brings not inspiration but bitterness. In such moments, they do not hate you, they hate the reminder of the life they turned away from. The tragedy of projection is that it distorts human relationships. Instead of seeing the other clearly, people interact with their own shadow, mistaking it for reality. The one offering kindness is bewildered by accusations of arrogance or manipulation, while the one projecting feels justified in their anger. Both become caught in an invisible play written by the unconscious. Until projection is recognized, the hostility cannot be resolved, for it is never truly about the giver of kindness, but about the unresolved conflicts of the receiver. Understanding this process makes it clear that hatred toward kindness is rarely personal. It is the unconscious attempting to purge itself of what it cannot face. The giver of kindness becomes a screen for the shadow, a figure onto whom disowned feelings and desires are cast. What appears as irrational hostility is, at its core, the self in conflict with itself, seeking relief by disguising its struggle as enmity toward another. Being kind is often imagined as a safe and unquestionable path, yet in truth, it carries risks that are rarely spoken about. Every time a person acts with genuine kindness, they open themselves up to the possibility of being misunderstood, rejected, or even despised. This paradox arises because kindness is not experienced in a vacuum. It enters into the complex inner world of others, where shadows, insecurities, and unhealed wounds are always at play. For some, your kindness is a balm, a welcome reminder that goodness still exists. For others, it is a disruption, stirring emotions they would rather not confront. Thus, the risk of kindness lies in its unpredictable reception, in the reality that what you offer as light may awaken darkness in another. When you act kindly, you make yourself vulnerable. Vulnerable not because you lack strength, but because you choose to act from the heart without knowing how your action will be interpreted. In doing so, you surrender control of the outcome. This is why some people fear kindness. It is not just an act of giving, but a form of exposure. If the recipient embraces it, connection is deepened. If the recipient rejects it, you stand open to hostility or scorn. To live kindly despite this uncertainty is an act of courage, for it requires accepting the possibility of pain without letting it close the heart. The risk also lies in the way kindness can awaken the shadow of another. To someone who carries bitterness, your compassion may feel like a rebuke. To someone who lives with pride, your generosity may feel like an insult. To someone accustomed to harshness, your gentleness may feel suspicious, even manipulative. They respond not to your intention, but to the inner storms your act of kindness has stirred. Instead of gratitude, you receive resentment. Instead of trust, you encounter hostility. What you offered freely becomes transformed in their perception into something threatening. This is the cost of kindness. It may shine a light where others wish only for darkness to remain. Another danger of kindness is that it creates expectations. The moment you give, you risk being seen not as a human being with your own boundaries, but as a resource to be used. Some may take advantage of your generosity, draining you without acknowledgement. Others may resent you for not giving enough, as though your kindness obligates you to endless sacrifice. When kindness awakens these dynamics, it becomes clear that it is not a simple act, but a complex force that reveals much about the inner state of those who encounter it. Hatred may even arise because your kindness cannot meet the unrealistic expectations it has inspired, yet the risk of kindness is also its strength. It strips away illusions and reveals truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. If someone turns against you because you were kind, you learn something about the hidden corners of their psyche. You see the unresolved conflicts, the insecurities, the projections that govern their reactions. Their response becomes less a statement about you and more a revelation of their inner world. In this way, every act of kindness, even when it leads to rejection, becomes a window into the mystery of human nature. The willingness to face this risk is what gives kindness its true value. It is not merely about being nice or polite, but about standing in authenticity, offering what is good without demanding control over how it will be received. To act kindly despite the possibility of misunderstanding is to live from a deeper center, one that does not retreat in the face of hostility. The risk is real, but so too is the reward. To remain true to oneself in a world where shadows are easily awakened is to embody a strength that no rejection can undo. Kindness that depends on applause, approval, or acceptance is not kindness, but a transaction disguised as virtue. To live authentically, kindness must flow from within as a natural expression of the integrated self, not as a strategy to win.